Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're taking a deep dive into Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged.
Oh, yeah.
It's a pretty hefty book.
It is.
And
Yeah.
it's known for sparking a lot of debate.
It certainly is.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty, can you give us a quick overview of the main themes?
Absolutely.
And what makes this book so thought-provoking?
At its core, Atlas Shrugged is an exploration of individualism versus collectivism,
Yeah.
the role of reason and innovation in society, and the morality of capitalism and self-interest. Rand challenges conventional notions of altruism and paints a rather dystopian picture of what happens when government control stifles individual creativity and ambition.
Okay, so we've got a clash of ideologies, a crumbling society, and a whole lot of philosophical questions. Sounds intense.
What's a big one?
Where do we even begin with a book like this?
Well, the story throws us right into the action, introducing us to Dagny Taggart, a woman trying to save her family's railroad, Taggart Transcontinental, amidst a collapsing economy.
So right from the start, we're seeing the impact of this societal decline on a very tangible level.
Exactly. The railroad, a symbol of American industry in progress, is literally falling apart, mirroring the broader decay of the nation. And Dagny, a strong, capable woman in a male-dominated industry, embodies the spirit of those who create and build, those who refuse to give up even when the world seems to be crumbling around them.
I'm already intrigued by her character. What kind of challenges does she face?
Well, she's dealing with crumbling infrastructure, government regulations that seem designed to stifle innovation, and a general sense of apathy and entitlement among the people around her.
So it's not just the physical world that's decaying, it's the moral and intellectual fabric of society as well.
Precisely. And to make matters worse, there's a wave of mysterious disappearances sweeping through the country.
Okay, now that's just creepy. Any clues as to what's happening to them?
That's the central mystery that drives the plot forward. Early on, we see the disappearance of Ellis Wyatt, a brilliant oil tycoon who simply walks away from his empire, leaving behind a cryptic message. I quit.
I quit. That's quite a statement. It's like he's rejecting the entire system.
Exactly. And as more and more of these productive individuals disappear, the question that keeps echoing throughout the book is, who is John Galt?
Ah, yes, the famous, who is John Galt? I've heard that phrase before, even without reading the book.
It's become a sort of cultural shorthand for a sense of frustration with a world that seems to punish achievement and reward mediocrity. John Galt, though we don't meet him directly in the beginning, represents the unknown force behind these disappearances, the embodiment of a philosophy that rejects the prevailing worldview.
So we've got Dagny trying to hold this crumbling world together, and this mysterious John Galt figure lurking in the background. What else should we know about the early parts of the book?
Well, we're also introduced to Hank Rearden, a steel magnate who embodies the spirit of innovation and creative genius.
Okay.
He develops a revolutionary new metal, Rearden metal, which is stronger and more efficient than anything else on the market.
He sounds like a true visionary, a real Atlas figure, shouldering the weight of the world on his back.
That's a great way to put it. He is in many ways an embodiment of the kind of individual that Rand celebrates in the book. The creator, the builder, the person who sees possibilities where others see only limitations.
But I imagine he faces his fair share of challenges as well, right? I mean, if the system is rigged against individual achievement, as you said, wouldn't someone like Rearden be a target?
Absolutely. He faces constant opposition from the government, who see his success as a threat to their control. He's also dealing with resentment and backstabbing from his peers, who are more interested in maintaining the status quo than embracing innovation.
It seems like Rand is really setting up a stark contrast here between those who create and those who try to control or exploit the creators.
Exactly. And this tension between individualism and collectivism, between the power of the human mind and the forces that seek to constrain it, runs throughout the entire book. It's a battle that plays out on both a personal and a societal level.
This is already giving me a lot to think about. What else happens in this first part of the book?
Well, we see the government implementing increasingly intrusive directives, like Directive 10-289, which essentially freezes the economy and puts all production under government control.
Wow, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. It's a classic example of how government intervention, even with the best of intentions, can often have unintended and disastrous consequences. It stifles innovation, creates shortages, and breeds resentment and rebellion.
And how do characters like Dagny and Rearden react to this increasing government control?
They both resist in their own ways. Dagny tries to work within the system to keep the railroad running, but she becomes increasingly disillusioned as she sees the futility of her efforts. Rearden, on the other hand, becomes more defiant, refusing to compromise his principles or bow to the pressure of the government.
So we're seeing two different approaches to dealing with this oppressive system. One is trying to make it work from within. The other is choosing to resist it outright.
Yes, and it will be interesting to see how these two approaches play out as the story progresses. But there's another key character we haven't mentioned yet. Francisco d'Anconia.
Oh, yes, the copper magnet. He's one of the ones who disappears, right?
He does, but not before delivering a powerful speech that exposes the flaws of altruism and the dangers of sacrificing oneself for the common good. He argues that true morality lies in pursuing one's own happiness and achieving one's full potential.
So he's challenging the traditional notion of self-sacrifice as a virtue.
Exactly. And his speech is one of the most memorable and controversial parts of the book. It really encapsulates Rand's philosophy of objectivism, which emphasizes reason, individualism, and the pursuit of rational self-interest.
Now, I'm remembering a particularly striking passage about money from Francisco's speech, something along the lines of, "So you think that money is the root of all evil? Have you ever asked, what is the root of money?"
Yes, that's a classic Rand quote. It challenges us to examine our assumptions about wealth and to recognize that money in its purest form represents a value exchange, a recognition of the effort and creativity that goes into producing goods and services.
It's a very different perspective on wealth than what we typically hear. It's not about greed or exploitation, but about the value that individuals create through their work and ingenuity.
Precisely. And that's one of the core tenets of Rand's philosophy. She argues that true wealth is created through productive effort, not through government handouts or the redistribution of wealth.
Okay, so we've got a collapsing society, a mysterious wave of disappearances, and a clash of ideologies between those who create and those who seek to control. Sounds like we're just getting started.
We are. As the world outside continues to crumble, Dagny stumbles upon a hidden valley in the Colorado Rockies.
Okay.
It's a secret society of sorts, a refuge for the brilliant minds who have gone on strike.
This must be Galt's Gulch, right?
Yes.
The legendary sanctuary we keep hearing about.
And it's here that we finally meet John Galt in person.
Oh.
He's not just a mythical figure. He's a real person with a profound philosophy that challenges the very foundations of the society outside.
I'm dying to know more about him. What's he like?
Well, he's a compelling figure, brilliant and charismatic. He embodies reason, individualism, and a fierce commitment to personal freedom. He argues that the pursuit of happiness is the highest moral purpose.
Okay.
And that individuals have the right to live for themselves, not for the sake of others.
This sounds like a direct contradiction to the prevailing ideology in the outside world, where self-sacrifice and service to the collective are seen as the highest virtues.
Exactly. Galt's Gulch operates on a completely different set of principles. It's a society based on voluntary exchange, where individuals trade value for value, and where no one is forced to sacrifice their own well-being for the sake of others.
It's fascinating how Rand uses Galt's Gulch to contrast a free society with the dystopian world outside.
Yeah.
What's life like in this hidden valley?
It's a place of incredible innovation and creativity, free from the constraints of government regulation and the burden of supporting those who choose not to produce. The residents of Galt's Gulch are flourishing. They're building new technologies, creating great works of art, and living according to their own values.
It sounds like a utopia. Almost too good to be true.
Well, Rand doesn't shy away from exploring the challenges and complexities of creating a truly free society. Even in Galt's Gulch, there are conflicts and disagreements.
Right.
But the fundamental difference is that these conflicts are resolved through reason and voluntary agreement, not through force or coercion.
This idea of a society built on reason and individual freedom is incredibly compelling, especially when contrasted with the chaos and despair of the outside world. But if Galt's Gulch is supposed to be a secret, how does Dagny even find it? And what's her reaction when she arrives?
Her arrival is a pivotal moment in the book. She's drawn to the valley by her relentless pursuit of the inventor of a revolutionary motor she's discovered. It turns out that the inventor is none other than John Galt himself.
Oh, wow.
She's initially resistant to his philosophy, still clinging to the belief that she can somehow save the railroad and the outside world. But as she witnesses the freedom and prosperity of Galt's Gulch, her convictions begin to crumble.
So she's torn between her loyalty to the world she knows and this radical new way of thinking.
Exactly, and her internal conflict reflects a central theme of the book, the struggle between clinging to a dying system and embracing a new, uncertain future.
I'm guessing this is where things start to get really complicated for Dagny.
You could say that. She's drawn to Galt both intellectually and romantically, but she's also deeply committed to her work and to the idea of saving the world she knows. She returns to the outside world, determined to keep Taggart Transcontinental running even as it becomes increasingly clear that the system is collapsing around her.
It sounds like she's trying to have it both ways, straddling two worlds that are fundamentally incompatible.
That's a great way to put it. And this internal conflict creates a lot of tension and drama. She's essentially living a double life, trying to uphold a system that she's beginning to realize is inherently flawed.
So while Dagny is struggling with her loyalties in the outside world, what's happening in Galt's Gulch? Are they just watching the world burn from a distance?
They are, in a sense. But it's not out of malice or indifference. They understand that the outside world is on a path to self-destruction and that any attempt to intervene would be futile.
So they've chosen to withdraw from a world that no longer values their contributions to create a new society based on their own values.
Exactly. They see it as an act of self-preservation, a way to protect themselves from the encroaching tyranny of the collectivist state.
It's a radical idea, but given the state of the world outside, I can see how it might seem like the only logical choice.
It's a choice that forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions about the nature of society, the role of individual responsibility, and the limits of self-sacrifice.
This is where I think Rand's writing really shines. She's not afraid to tackle these big philosophical questions head-on and to challenge the reader to think critically about their own beliefs.
Absolutely. She doesn't offer easy answers or simplistic solutions. She wants us to grapple with the complexity of these issues and to come to our own conclusions.
So we've got Dagny struggling to hold on to a dying world, John Galt and the strikers building a new society in secret, and the government desperately trying to maintain control as the world crumbles around them. What happens next?
Well, the government becomes increasingly desperate to find John Galt. Believing that he holds the key to fixing their mess, they still don't understand that their own policies are the root cause of the collapse.
It's like they're trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Exactly. They're so blinded by their ideology that they can't see the forest for the trees.
Okay, so they're looking for John Galt. But he's hidden away in Galt's Gulch, right? How do they even begin to find him?
Remember how Dagny is still operating in the outside world?
Uh-huh.
Well, her connection to Galt becomes their undoing.
Oh, no, I have a bad feeling about this. What happens? So Dagny's connection to Galt becomes their undoing.
It does.
That can't be good.
Galt, deeply in love with Dagny, risks everything to be with her.
Cool.
He follows her back to New York
Mm.
and even takes a job as a worker at Taggart Transcontinental, just to be near her.
That's incredibly romantic, but also incredibly risky. I mean, wouldn't someone recognize him?
You'd think so. But remember, the society outside Galt's Gulch is crumbling. People are so focused on their own survival, so distrustful of one another, that they fail to see what's right in front of them. They've been conditioned to accept mediocrity and dismiss anyone who stands out.
So he manages to blend in for a while.
Yeah.
But how does the government finally catch up with him?
Well, it's not the government who finds him. It's actually Eddie Willers, Dagny's loyal assistant, who unwittingly leads them to Galt.
Eddie. But he's been with Dagny all along. He's seen the collapse firsthand. Why would he betray her trust?
It's not so much a betrayal as a misguided attempt to save the world he knows. Eddie, despite his loyalty to Dagny, is struggling to understand why everything is falling apart. He hears John Galt's radio address, which we'll talk about in a moment, and becomes convinced that Galt is the only one who can fix things.
So Eddie thinks he's doing the right thing by bringing Galt to the authorities. He believes they can somehow force Galt to use his genius to solve their problems.
Exactly. Eddie is a tragic figure in many ways. He represents the well-intentioned but ultimately misguided individuals who cling to a broken system, failing to see that the system itself is the problem.
It's heartbreaking, really. He's trying to do what he thinks is best, but he's completely blind to the true nature of the situation.
And this blindness leads to a devastating outcome. The government, alerted by Eddie, captures Galt and subjects him to torture using a device called the Ferris Persuader.
The Ferris Persuader. What kind of device is that?
It's a horrific invention, designed to inflict excruciating pain and extract information from its victims. The authorities believe they can force Galt to reveal the secrets of his strike and to use his knowledge to salvage their failing economy.
So they're essentially resorting to brute force, to torture, to maintain their grip on power.
Precisely. They're so desperate to cling to control that they're willing to abandon any pretense of morality or respect for individual rights.
But Galt is a man of principle. He's not going to break under pressure.
You're absolutely right. He endures the torture with remarkable resilience, refusing to give in to their demands. He understands that to compromise his principles would be to betray everything he believes in, to legitimize a system that he sees as inherently corrupt.
His defiance is incredibly powerful. He's standing up for individual freedom and the power of the human mind, even in the face of unimaginable pain.
It's a testament to his strength of character, his unwavering commitment to his ideals, and it's in this moment of crisis that Galt makes a bold move. He hijacks the national radio waves and delivers a lengthy speech outlining his philosophy.
Wow. Broadcasting his message to the entire country while he's being tortured by the government. That takes guts.
It does. It's a brilliant tactical move. He understands that the only way to defeat a system built on lies is to expose those lies to the light of day, to awaken the minds of those who have been seduced by the false promises of collectivism.
So what does he say in his speech? What message is he trying to convey to the masses?
He argues that the root of all evil is the rejection of reason. He champions individualism, the pursuit of happiness, and the importance of personal responsibility. He denounces altruism and self-sacrifice as destructive forces that ultimately lead to the enslavement of the human spirit.
It's a powerful and provocative message. But does it resonate with the people? I mean, they've been conditioned to believe the opposite. That self-sacrifice is a virtue, and that the collective good trumps individual happiness.
Some are receptive to his message. They recognize the truth in his words and begin to question the system that has imprisoned them. But others are terrified by his ideas. They've been so thoroughly indoctrinated that they can't even conceive of a world where individuals are free to pursue their own happiness.
It's a classic case of cognitive dissonance. It's easier to cling to familiar lies than to confront uncomfortable truths.
Exactly. And this tension between those who are awakening to the truth and those who cling to the old ways creates a lot of conflict and drama in the final parts of the book.
So what happens next? Does Galt escape? What becomes of Dagny? And what happens to the world outside Galt's Gulch?
Well, I don't want to spoil all the surprises, but let's just say that the final act of Atlas Shrugged is both thrilling and thought-provoking. Galt's speech sparks a chain of events that leads to the collapse of the existing social order. Dagny, finally realizing the futility of trying to save a dying world, chooses to join Galt and the strikers in Galt's Gulch. And the world outside, deprived of its most productive members, descends into chaos and darkness.
It sounds like a bleak ending, but also a hopeful one. The old world dies, but a new one is born. A world built on the principles of reason, individualism, and freedom.
That's a great way to put it. It's a cautionary tale, a reminder that when we suppress individual creativity and ambition, when we sacrifice freedom for the sake of security, we ultimately destroy the very foundations of a thriving society.
Atlas Shrugged is a challenging and controversial book, but it's also a deeply moving and thought-provoking one. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we live in. It reminds us that the fight for individual freedom is never truly over, and that the choices we make have profound consequences.
It's a book that stays with you long after you've finished reading it. It makes you question your assumptions, reevaluate your values, and consider what kind of world you want to create.
Well, that's our deep dive into Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's always more to explore. If you're intrigued by the ideas we've discussed today, I encourage you to pick up a copy of the book and dive in yourself. You might be surprised by what you discover.
And remember, the choice is always yours. To shrug or to stand tall.
Until next time, keep those pages turning.